the beliefs that govern our mind, the beliefs that we hold about ourselves, that will be the thing that ultimately guides and dictates our actions, dictates our habits, dictates the things we do.
It's crazy to think about that because then it puts a bit of an onus on us to look at those belief systems. Are we believing what our circumstances tell us, or are we believing what God has said to us?
Elijah answered, "Woman, what do you have in your house? What do you already have in your possession? What is it that you already have that you may be overlooking?"
You know that you're walking in purpose when you recognize that what you're doing is adding value to other people's lives. Welcome to The Link, where we connect Christ to our broken world. Here on the podcast, we talk about all the important areas of life and culture, presenting Christ as the missing link that brings everything together. Join us on this journey on The Link podcast with your host, Professor X. Hey, what's up, guys? It's your boy, Professor X, and welcome to The Link. Happy 2025. It's so good that you guys have joined us again for this year. Just want to thank you all for the support that you gave us last year. We hit 100 subscribers in the year 2024, and I'm looking forward to what we will see in 2025. Just have to let you guys know that this year is going to be really, really good. We have some things that we're working on behind the scenes, so stay tuned as we start to roll those things out. Your guys are going to be excited for what we have in store. But as we kick off the year, we're focusing on a very familiar topic, something that we all talk about when the year turns around, and that is purpose. Whenever the year starts, we have some kind of goal that we're going after, something we want to pursue that we're so excited about that we start to say, yes, let's go for it. But have we really examined if it's our purpose? You know, sometimes we may have New Year's resolutions. We know exactly what we want to do. Other times we're not so sure. But this episode is the beginning of a series that we'll have on examining purpose for what it really is. So today I have a great guest joining me, and it's a personal friend of mine. He's had a journey of redirection. He started life with one idea, with one goal in mind, but as life went on, God shifted his path to the role of public speaking. And as he talks about his journey, I know that there are a lot of gems that we'll take from it. So, guys, stay tuned for this entire conversation. Let's get right to it. First episode of 2025. Let's go. All right, y'all. So, joining me for the first episode of the year 2025 is none other than Kristen Greaves. What's happening, bro?
Hey, what's up, man? I'm pretty good. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Yeah, man, this is it's so cool to have you on because we've been talking back and forth for a little while now, so it's good to actually have you in the space, right? So for those who don't know, this is one of Raphael Sol's mentees, and bro, you are prolific in your speech. You've been walking this journey out in, speaking publicly, motivational speaking, public speaking. And when I see you speak, it's almost like I can hear so many of your ideas just being put together in such a professional way. Like, bro, you be out there talking as if you've been here for a minute. So when I thought about who to bring on for this, because we're talking about purpose, I thought to myself, let me talk to my man Kristen, because we were talking one time and you told me about how your journey to public speaking was a bit unorthodox. It's not like you said to yourself, I'm gonna be the best speaker in the world at 3 years old. Like, we saw that there was a journey there. So as we're talking about purpose, Kristen, I just want to get into your origin story, right? So, like, what was your upbringing like? What was your outlook? What did you first set out to do? Let me start there, man.
Those some good questions, I must say. So to carry you all the way back, I will give you a general kind of view. So pretty much for those of you who may never have heard of my story, I grew up in a single parent household, and my father was in my life, and for a long time that was something that really impacted me, like something that really shook me and shook my world. Because as many of I believe most of us will already know, as ordained in the Bible, God always intended from the very beginning for husband and wife and for father and mother to be there to produce and to care for a child. And obviously when one parent is not present, rather, it significantly has an effect not only on the family but also on the child. And in this situation, I was the one who, well, had to experience that because my father wasn't there. It was like, wow, like my world was crumbling because now I feel like a big piece of the puzzle or a big piece of my life was missing. And as a result of that, I started struggling with my identity, struggling knowing who I was as a person, struggling knowing like why even as am I here? And I guess we will get deeper into this whole conversation on the purpose in today's conversation. But that was something that really impacted my life. And as a result of that, as a result of my father not being there, then I started to fail academically because now I labeled myself as less than enough. I labeled myself as not worth it. So, all because of that belief system now that was guiding my mindset, it now affected my behavior and it affected the way I operated. So as I said just now, I started feeling academically as you went to the same school I went to as well. And as you know, at our school is like when a person fails the subject, the teachers will always get a red ink pen and they will circle every single subject that a student failed. And unfortunately, because I had failed, I thought that maybe now I was a failure. And maybe some of your listeners can relate to that kind of feeling because you fail, you feel now that maybe you are a failure. And as a result of that, that led to other things, other ripple effects. It started to affect how I reacted to my mom, who was the head one who was there for me. It affected how I reacted to her. I started struggling with addictions. I had anger issues. And then on top of all of those circumstances, I was also raised in a community where a lot of young persons like our age, younger, like literally involved in violence, drug addiction, gun violence, and other things and all that nature. So for a long time, I felt, well, maybe my circumstances validate why I can never amount to anything. In other words, I was kind of seeing like the world through all the struggles and all the challenges and the mistakes I made. And now I started to feel, well, yeah, maybe there was no purpose for your life. Maybe there was no purpose, no reason for you being here on this earth. No, I want to share something here. Bear in mind, at that time, God had sent people in my life, like my mom, my teachers, my aunt, my grandmother, who would speak life into me and who would always say things like, "Son, you will do great things. I believe in you. I know you have the potential." They always used to say that. "I know you have the potential to do great things, Kristen." However, despite those words, I still didn't feel like it was enough. And here's the thing I've come to realize about life. While it's great to have others believe in you, at the end of the day, what matters most is what you ultimately believe about yourself. You see, the whole world could be saying these wonderful things about you. God says great things about us. He tells us we were formed in his image. But here's the thing, until we come into alignment and agreement with what he has said, then until you believe who you are or who you were made to be, then the transformation won't come. So because of all of the situations, then I felt, well, maybe my circumstances disqualified my purpose. And I don't know if you want me to go so deep already into the conversation, but I remember,
You good, you good.
yeah, man. Yeah, man. And I remember one day I literally I call it rock bottoms, like my lowest moment. Like God had to intersect my path. And literally, I remember I was sitting at the corner of my bedroom, the corner of my bed, rather. And I was crying. It was like, I was bawling. I was really crying. And I remember I just heard his voice came to my mind. I said, "Son, your circumstances won't determine your destiny. And you see, that moment that I heard those words of hope, that moment that God intersected my path and said, son, your circumstances don't determine your destiny. I realized, it doesn't matter your past. It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter your mistakes, your failures, your setbacks, the situation you may have grown up in. It doesn't matter any of that. God ultimately has a plan and a purpose for all of our lives. And you see, that was the turning point for me when I realized, my situation doesn't determine how far I can go. When God intersected my path and said, son, I have a greater purpose for your life, that's when things change. So that's just the general synopsis of, yeah, Kristen Greaves from then.
Listen, dude, that there's so much to unpack in that story, but the big thing that you said that really stuck with me just now was how you said that God had to tell you that your circumstances didn't dictate your purpose or where you're going. And I think that's somewhere we need to camp out for a second. Cause
Bro,
when I really think about it, right? Circumstances on their own really are a bad judge of purpose. But for some reason in our world, we can often look at circumstances as a precursor to what's coming. So if you grew up in a rough neighborhood, not so much finances, little opportunities, then the obvious thing to think is, well, I can't do much. Because as far as you can see, there are no opportunities coming. There's nobody coming to give you a big break. There's nothing that's going to be like, this is going to propel you forward. So then it can be easy to think that your life is just this small thing that can't go past a certain point. But when I think about the truth of the matter, I think about people like Joseph in the Bible. If you look at Joseph's life, the circumstances on their own would tell you his life should not have ended well. You see how his
so true.
brothers betrayed him. He might end up
Mhm.
as a slave. Then he got promoted to become like the top of somebody's house. Then he was put in prison. So you look at all of those things and think to yourself, well, dang, boy, this guy just took the short stick of life. But then you see how God intervened at every single point. And at the end of his story, he's literally the second in command over Egypt. So clearly, clearly there's something here that is telling us that purpose is not determined just on our circumstances, but is based on the will of God for our lives. But you also pointed at something, Kristen, that I will want you to kind of expand on that. That as much as God may have a will for your life, and as much as people may say that you're born for greatness or you have potential, it really only starts to come into action when you yourself believe it and you yourself say to yourself, I am going for it. Like your purpose needs your agreement. So, bro, if you could talk about that for a little bit, that'd be great.
Sir. Yeah, and if I could put you back a little bit to your scenario with Joseph, explaining this whole story of Joseph, if we look at the entire Bible, if we look at, as you said, Joseph, if we look at the Moses, if we look at Abraham and Daniel and David and all of them, even all the way to the disciples, we would see that oftentimes what God called them to do, when God called them, he didn't call them whilst they were in perfect circumstances. As you said, Joseph, he was betrayed by his brothers. He was sold into slavery, Potiphar's house, then prison. It was like one challenge after the next. If we look at Daniel, from a young boy, this is Daniel. He's being he had to go into the lion's den, and then so many different situations before they were able to reach a place where God intended for them to be. So the reality is, whilst our circumstances may look dim, whilst we may not come from the best homes, whilst we may have made mistakes in the past, whilst the things in life may not always be ideal, the moment that we say to ourselves, hey, what the enemy meant for evil, God can turn it around for good. You see, from the moment we start to believe, hey, there's a bigger plan, things start to change. What did Joseph say at the end of all of the situations he faced? He said, what the enemy meant for evil, God ultimately intended for good. So I want one of the things I want your listeners to understand is that, hey, it doesn't matter what challenge you may be facing right now. It doesn't matter the trials you may be going through. Even like Job, it may be one thing behind the next. But the moment that you come into agreement with God and you realize, hey, God, He loves me. God, He wants what is best for me. God is using this situation to grow me and to develop me. The moment that I start to see it from that perspective, then I am inspired and then I am encouraged and I have the fortitude now to keep going forward, to keep stepping. Now to your second question in regards to coming into agreement with what God says about you and like how you want me to explain like how person may have good things to say about you, but it's like you ultimately have to believe for yourself. One of the things I've come to realize in life is that you will always act in accordance with the belief that you hold about yourself. I'm gonna say that again. We will always act in accordance with the belief that is governing our minds. If we think of like elections, right? We will vote for a particular candidate, and whichever candidate has the most votes will be the one that governs whether it's the country, the nation, etc. Well, this a similar thing happens with our lives. What the beliefs that govern our mind, the beliefs that we hold about ourselves, that will be the thing that ultimately guides and dictates our actions, dictates our habits, dictates the things we do. So if we believe negative things, if we believe false beliefs, then that will guide our lives. But on the other hand, if we come into agreement with what God says about us, if we come into agreement with who God declares that we are, then that will ultimately change the trajectory of our life. So at the end of the day, it all comes back to our beliefs. As I like to put it, our beliefs will determine the way we live.
Facts, bro. There are many statements truer than that, and it's crazy to think about that because then it puts a bit of an onus on us to look at those belief systems, right? To really examine what is driving our thoughts. What are the things that we're saying to ourselves? What's the things that we believe about ourselves? Are we believing what our circumstances tell us? Or are we believing what God has said to us? And one of the things that you pointed out is that when God intervened for your life and told you that you were made for something greater and you came into agreement, that is when things started to shift. And I remember in a conversation before that you were talking about how COVID-19 played a really big role in shifting you towards public speaking. Because I think you were telling me that you had a completely different plan for where you wanted to go, but during that time things kind of got shifted. So now that you've agreed with what God is telling you, you have a bigger plan. How did you see that start to uh bring public speaking into the picture, and what was COVID-19's role in all of that?
Yeah, so as you said, the COVID period was a significant period, a life-changing period within my life. So to tell your audience the honest truth, I never expected that I would be doing what I'm doing today. Like as you said in the beginning, I never grew up saying, well, oh, I want to be this public speaker. I never said that I wanted to be an author. In fact, if you were to tell me when I was a young child that, hey, at such a young age you'll be doing these things, I would not believe you. That is the honest truth. My plan my dream rather, I should say, when I was younger is like once I'm finished secondary school, I will go to a college overseas. I will study aviation and I will become this commercial pilot. I always wanted to be. But unfortunately, life had its own plans. God has his own plans for me. And as a result, I had to be redirected. So during the period when there was COVID, when the COVID-19 pandemic was impacting the world, well, one, a lot of places were shutting down. Two, that was the period of time when I was just finishing secondary school. And as I was finishing secondary school, well, I didn't have the finances there and then to be able to go overseas to pursue the aviation as I was hoping for. And then, as we all know, that was a period of time when COVID came and a lot of travel was shut down. A lot of things were just shut down. And it was like, you have to make a adjustment here. You have to make a pivot. And pretty much in that COVID-19 period, a blessing came out of it for me. And the blessing during that period of time was I got time to reset. The blessing that came out of COVID-19 was, yes, it had its challenges. Was, yes, it had its setbacks. But at that period of time, I got the opportunity to pause, to reflect, and to really take inventory of my life. Because you see, sometimes in life, especially in this hustle and grind culture, it's so easy to keep going, grind, hustle, get up, go to school, go to this place, go to that place. And you see the problem with that, you are never taking time to think about your life. You're not taking time to seek God. And that's a challenge. And you see, the COVID period gave me opportunity to pause and to really press into God. And you see, in that period of time, I started taking my faith serious. It was that period of time I told myself, hey, I have no excuse. You are home. It's like you're not going anywhere. You have no excuse. And it's like I had this opportunity and I decided, hey, I'm gonna make the most out of this opportunity. I'm going to take this time to get grounded in my faith. And here's the interesting thing. And I find it so interesting how it's all tying back into the conversation we're having today about purpose. The moment I started seriously seeking my creator, the moment I seriously started seeking God, I started to first understand who I was. In other words, I got clear about my identity. And guess what? The moment I got clear about who I was, then I was able to get clear on what my purpose is. I don't know if your audience caught that, but I'm going deeper into what I'm about to say. You see, you can never discover your purpose until you know who you are. And you see, the moment I took the time to seek God, the moment I took the time to go back to the source, my creator, that was the moment I discovered, hey, I was made for a bigger plan. I was made for a bigger purpose. And then I remember one day I was doing a Bible study session with my mom. And I can see it so clearly now. I was sitting now at the table. It was nighttime. We were having a Bible study and we were studying the chapter about it was the chapter about the talents, the parable of the talents. And literally, whilst I tell you no, like literally, as we were studying the Bible at that time, I remember this constant thought coming to my mind. Constantly. It was like a thought I could not get rid of. And I remember I was sitting at the table and this thought came to my mind. If you don't use your gift of speaking now, you are going to lose it forever. I tell you no lie. It was so clear, I cannot deny it. It was such a clear thought. It said, if you don't use your gift of speaking now, you will lose it. Now, bear in mind, at that moment, I was never doing any public speaking. I was not inspiring anybody. I that was never something that crossed my mind. But it was like once again, God intersected my tracks and literally a clear thought. If you don't use your gift of speaking, you're going to lose it. And I remember when that Bible study session was finished, I literally called out one of my good friends. She actually went to school with us, Sasha. And I called Sasha and I told her the whole situation. And I told her, I think it's time for me to start a ministry. And literally within that conversation, guess what we did? We prayed about it. And literally, we started putting preparations in place on how I was going to move forward. And you see, at that time, I realized it was COVID-19 period, and a lot of persons they were losing hope. A lot of persons they were discouraged. Even persons that I was connected to and that I knew personally, a lot of persons had died, and a lot of persons were struggling to figure out, hey, how are we going to make it through this period? And literally the thought came to my mind. I need to start using my gift of speaking to inspire others and to make a positive impact in their life. And literally, one thing led to the next and to the next. And somehow I am where I am now today, speaking in front of live audiences. But as I said before, that was never something that, oh, I had dreamed about doing previously. It was never something that crossed my mind, but it was more like God called me today. And one of the things I can say now looking back, he called me to it. And guess what? He was able to equip me for it. And I want to say this, I just want to say this to your listeners. If God calls you to something, if you feel this tugging on your heart, if there's this thought that's constantly coming to your mind that you need to do this thing and it's not going away, I want to encourage you. I want to let you know that if God calls you to it, whilst you may not understand everything, whilst you may not know how it will work out, if He calls you to it, He will equip you for it.
My man, my listen, that is such a powerful testimony. And you know something about purpose that really caught me just now is that God showed you in COVID-19 as you press further and further into Him that there was a need for your voice. And once you caught that need and recognized that need, it caused you to move forward. Because I find with purpose, right? This is a theory that I have, a running theory, that a lot of times purpose is connected to something that upsets you so much that you have to do something about it. Like it's something that affects you uniquely that might not affect other people. So, for example, right in the same COVID-19, we are seeing people that were struggling with loss, struggling with finances, struggling with the lockdown. And you have some people that were nonchalant about it. You have some people that felt bad about it, but they weren't going to do anything. They were only looking out for their families. There's nothing wrong with that. But for some reason, it hit you in a particular way where it's like, you know what? I have to say something about this. And I have to relate to this too, because truthfully, COVID-19 is also a big reason why this podcast exists, right? Because when COVID-19 came down, things are locked down, not much activity. I wasn't able to play golf much at all, to the point where my brother and I would go on the front lawn and basically make our own golf course. But similar to you, COVID-19 caused me to really sit down and face myself. And I got into a lot of reading. Like for the first time ever, is like I'm reading book after book. And as I want to, like I finish a book in a week, and it's like this is not how I grew up being. Uh but as COVID-19 progressed, I recognized the influence of social media. And I started to see that this is how people were starting to really take in their content. Like you saw Instagram coming up, you saw TikTok was huge back in COVID-19. People sending their messages, inspirational messages. And just like you, Kristen, I had that burning feeling in myself that the things God was showing me, I gotta start sharing them. So I remember in like 2021, I started off by sending out Instagram lives. Like I bring on one or two people sometimes to have conversations, and then it got into posting regularly on Instagram, and then I started a YouTube channel, and all the while, I felt as though there wasn't like a clear writing in the sky, like this is what you need to do. But similar to you, throughout my life, people have spoken to me about my ability to speak. They've told me about my impact. I've heard people telling me that I'm supposed to preach one day. So, as I'm in my current position, I'm thinking, well, the best tool I have right now is social media. So, one thing leads to the other. And now here we are today talking on a podcast. Like, I did not I did not have this in the books, guys. uh,
And if you don't mind, and not to mean to cross you, but if you don't mind me
mhm.
adding here, it just shows that God is able to produce, like we are able to be creative even in the midst of chaos. God is able to produce something even amidst the challenges, even amidst the circumstances that may be around us that may not be ideal, that may not be perfect, that may not be all perfectly aligned. God is able to use us as his creative beings and to produce something that is able to serve others. You know, as you were speaking, the story that came back to me was the widow's oil, the story in the Bible. I can't remember if it was Elijah or Elisha, so I'm not a Bible scholar, so please forgive me if I got it wrong. But I think it's Elijah. And I remember the story with the widow. She didn't know how she was going to be able to pay off the debt that her husband had left, and she runs to the man of God Elijah, asking him like for some assistance. And Elisha, guess what he asked her? Elijah asked her, "Woman, what do you have in your house?" I just want that to sink in for a moment. He said, "What do you have in your house?" In other words, let me reword it slightly. What do you already have in your possession? What is it that you already have that you may be overlooking? You see, for us, it was social media. We weren't using it prior to the COVID. For us, as I said, God said to me, "Hey, you got to use this gift of speaking." Now, I never knew before then. Hey, I had this gift of speaking. I didn't even know it was a gift. So I was not aware of what was in my possession. And you see, when Elisha told the lady that, she said, "Well, I don't have anything except for a jar of oil." You see, the words that she used, it really caught my attention because it indicates to me that there's a possibility that she was overlooking what she already had. The oil that she had, she probably thought that it was not going to be enough. And guess what Elijah said to her? He said, "Go to the various persons within her community, ask them for the jars. And when you come back, close the door, pray, and as you start pouring, use the little that you have as you start pouring, you will start to see the miracle." And she started pouring and pouring and pouring. Eventually, after all the jars were filled, the oil stopped, and then now she was able to go back and to sell what she had. Now I want to tie this to purpose. You realize that what Elisha asked her to do, first thing he asked her to do was to take inventory of what she already had in her possession. But you will realize that at the end of the story, she ended up going back to the same people and adding value to them. In other words, there's usually a process that I usually teach persons on how to find their purpose. It's a three simple step process. Number one, look to God. The woman of the lady, she went to the man of God seeking for guidance. I feel like for us, we have to go to God, seek our creator, seek him for guidance. Then number two, we must look inward, get to know who we truly are, know our identity. And then last but not least, we have to look around us, see who can we serve, who can we add value to. You see, by you creating your YouTube, by you using your Instagram, by you using this podcast, you are adding value to others. In my situation was by me using my voice to inspire, by me using my gift of writing to inspire others, now is adding value to others. You see? So at the end of the day, God is able to produce something beautiful even in the midst of chaos, even in the midst of challenging circumstances.
Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying the podcast so far. Just popping in to say that if you haven't already, make sure to like this episode and also subscribe to stay updated with all of the content that is coming your way. Join me on the journey of finding the missing link. Peace. That is so true. And you pointed at something that is, I really hope that everyone hears that point. The fact that purpose is always going to serve others. That is a huge part of purpose. You know that you're walking in purpose when you recognize that what you're doing is adding value to other people's lives. Because The Bible teaches us very clearly that what we do is for the glory of God. And a big part of what gives God glory is that other people are served. He said that if anyone wants to be the greatest, then he's supposed to be the servant of all. So having that servant's heart, having that attitude of helping others towards their destiny, helping others towards their purpose, helping others towards fulfilling their own needs. That is such a big part of purpose. And so that kind of rules out some of the things that the world may tell us. Because a lot of times when we look at the world, we see careers, we see opportunities that are self serving. We see people that have made it to the top of their respective fields, and it looks as if it was all for their own glory. They have their own crowns, they have their own approval from man. But the biblical way and the righteous way is really using the influence that we get to serve the people. So whether that is through charity, whether that's through generosity, whether that is through mentorship, whether that is through um, just giving, is a situation where it requires us to have a selfless attitude. And I don't know about you, Kristen, but for me personally, that is something that God works on with me all the time, because it's easy to get in that mode where it's like, I got to do this for me. I got to get to the highest because I want to be comfortable in life, like I want to make it. I want to make sure that when I die, people remember me, they got my name on a plaque somewhere and they know that Xavier Wiggins live a sweet life. But there's a slippery slope with that one. Because the trap is that if we get in that selfish mentality, we can be overtaken by pride. And we learn that pride is what comes before a fall. So having that humility from God to remember that anything that is tied to purpose is tied to serving, and learn to see the blessing in that, because the Bible says it's literally better to give than to receive. And I'm sure, Kristen, that as you've gone through your journey, you've seen that. Because, the whole thing about motivational speaking, public speaking, is that you get to see the fruit of the people you inspire, right? And there's nothing like that feeling of fulfillment that something I went through, whether it was a tough season, a hard lesson, something that was rough, ended up helping somebody else on their own journey.
Very true. And it's a very fulfilling feeling because like when persons send you messages saying, "Oh, how this message you shared really impacted me." Even up to yesterday, I had a message where a video that I had shared, the person said they really needed to hear that. Is a real fulfilling feeling to see. Wow, God can take anybody and use them to be a blessing to others. And the thing is, sometimes the reality is, we may not, on this earth, we may not understand every single thing. We may not understand every challenge that we're going through. We may not understand why God may be allowing us to face those things. But here's what I want you to always remember: there's a purpose for the pain. I'm going to say that again. There's a purpose for the pain. You see, even if we look at the story of Job, the reality is Job went through multiple trials. Maybe for some of your listeners, you are going through facing challenge after challenge that you did not expect. It may be one situation behind the next. It might be financial, it might be mental, it may be emotional, spiritual, some other challenge you may be facing. But guess what? God is able to use that situation so you can be a blessing to somebody else. And as I personally believe, our gifts, our stories, our life, our experiences, our talents, our abilities, or even our resources, they were not just given to us for our status. They were given so we can be of service to others. To others. And there's this quote by Denzel Washington that I heard when I was younger, and I just love it. He says, "Do not aspire just to make a living. Aspire to make a difference. Don't just aspire to make a living. That's fine. Don't just aspire for that. But most importantly, aspire to make a difference. As you said, our responsibility as human beings, we have two main responsibilities. One, to honor God, and then two, to be of service to each other.
Bro, you know something? That quote from Denzel Washington, I remember that speech. And that quote in particular is the part that really rings through. And going back to the whole thing of purpose and serving others, to be able to aspire to make a difference, again, it really takes a dying to self because people see the influence that people like Denzel Washington have, that certain pastors have or leaders have, but don't understand the sacrifice that's behind all of that influence. The hours that they have to dedicate to their craft, the hours they have to dedicate to serving other people, whether it's through answering messages or mentorship that they might do or projects they have to work on. So when it comes to purpose, I really hope you guys know that there's a sacrifice that comes with it. Let's be honest, right? There is truly a sacrifice that comes with purpose. It's not all glamorous, it's not all what people see. There are a lot of hours you log behind the scenes. For example, Kristen, I can't imagine how many hours you spent practicing certain speeches, making sure your diction was good, classes you've gone through to make sure that you're honing your craft. And for me personally, as a golfer, there are so many things that I do in practice that no one ever sees, right? Certain things I have to do to make sure that my swing is correct, that my strategy is correct. And all people see is what happens on the big day tournaments, but there's so much behind that. And so when it comes to purpose, we may know what it is. We may have accepted that God has a bigger purpose for our life, and we've accepted, yes, we're going to do it. But have we accepted the sacrifice that comes with it? Are we ready to put in the time when we don't want to? When we all we want to do is stay in bed, we want to hit snooze on that alarm. We definitely don't want to look at our notes to figure out what's supposed to be done today. But are you willing to say yes anyway? And when you are willing to say yes anyway, that is when we start to become unstoppable. Truly.
And if I can add in here too, and what you're saying, it triggered a thought that I just love. I just love this analogy. The work that you do in the dark will ultimately produce the harvest that you would like to see in the light. So for me personally, I love a seed. I love gardening. I love to look at plants. And there's such a profound lesson that I gather from plants. You see, and as you said, people might think, well, how knowing your life's purpose is a great and wonderful thing. Walking your purpose is a great and wonderful thing. And it is, but it is not always easy, as you said. If and I can come back to my analogy about the seed, but if you look at Jesus's life, his purpose was to save the world from sin. But guess what? He had to lay down his life. Even in the garden, he said, Father, if you will, take this cup from me. Nonetheless, I want you to catch this. This is deep. Nonetheless, not my will, but thine will be done. And purpose is not always easy to walk in. It's good, yes, it's fulfilling. There are rewards to it, yes, don't get me wrong. But there are also challenges. So going back to my analogy with the seed, if we take a seed and we put it in the mud, it doesn't produce the harvest the same day, the next day, not even the next week. There's a process that has to be undertaken. And guess what? That seed has to go into the mud in the dark. You can't see the seed after you have planted it. It goes into the dark, the muck, the mud, and all those and all in the soil so it can soak up the nutrients that are available down there. And after a little time, you might see a little sprout coming up. And then after some time, it grows and grows. Then you might get some blossoms, and then eventually you will get to produce the fruit. But guess what? The fruit is not meant for the tree. The fruit is not just meant for you to keep. The fruit is meant to give, to serve, to be a blessing to others. But guess what? The process of swelling as the seed, the process of growing is not easy. It doesn't happen overnight. It comes in with time. It takes time. And that's why I want your listeners to understand the growth process is not always easy. Even though, whilst we may be on the other side of the screen, I want you to understand we are still growing. We don't have it all figured out. There are still challenges which we face along our journey. But the reality is, the key is to keep growing our roots. And the stronger our roots are, then the stronger we'll be able to stand and the more fruit we'll be able to produce.
Bro, you just said something so powerful. The deeper the roots grow, the better we'll be able to stand. I feel like you're in my prayer closet because I feel like the Holy Spirit has been telling me this non-stop since December. Grow deeper roots. And you're right, both of us are still growing. Like
Yeah.
this, we may be starting to walk in our purpose, but there's still so much for us to discover. But one more thing I really want to touch on is yes, purpose has a sacrifice. Yes, purpose has the parts that are difficult. But God is so good that He has given us tools and ways to work through those hard seasons. And one of the biggest blessings that I have discovered in terms of pursuing purpose in the difficult times is the blessing of accountability through people. The people He puts alongside us to help us remember what we're doing, why we're doing it, and constantly keep that fire lit under us to keep pursuing. So, Kristen, as we would have talked about earlier, you would have found a mentor in Raphael Saul. Raphael Saul is a really known speaker here in Barbados. He travels internationally, spreading, positivity, encouragement, and he's been a big role in terms of your development. So, I'm kind of curious, bro. How did that relationship form? How have you seen that help you in your journey in public speaking?
If I could just say this, right? If there's one recurring theme that's coming out from this discussion, is that God orders our steps. Now, to tell you how me and Raphael met, this was a God moment because, yes, at that time, this was back in the end of 2020, early 2021. Now I've been seeing Raphael in that season of my life. I've been seeing him online speaking at these different places. I even used to hear him on the radio on evenings when I was coming home from school. And I was always fascinated by this gentleman. Like he's able to speak so powerfully. For me, he is and he was like a real inspiration. And I remember saying to myself, I would love to just meet him just to learn from him, etc. And I remember one there was a pop-up shop um by the Hilton Hotel. I was down there and I was selling my books. And my mom actually went and told me because she was walking around the facility and she was going to the different so many different stalls that were there. And she came out, she told me, Raphael is actually down there in the next room. And I was like, huh? For real? And she told me, go ahead, introduce yourself. Tell him that you've been looking at his videos and you love the work that he's doing, etc. And bear in mind, I was so nervous at that time because I was like a big fan. Yeah, and I went in, I introduced myself, and somehow it was like God was able to allow this relationship, this friendship, this brotherhood to build and to grow. And I decided to ask him if he'll be willing to mentor me. And obviously, it took some time, obviously, but I am forever grateful for him and his mentorship and all of the guidance that he gives me. And still to this day, he is a big inspiration for me. So the way that we were able to build that brotherhood, that friendship, was through God, honestly, because that was not something that I ordained. It was not something that, ooh, I thought that I planned for. It was just something that God provided the opportunity. And hey, when God gives you the opportunity, make the most out of it. I can't give you no technical answer for that. That's just my take on it.
No, honestly, it's not something to take for granted. The fact that God really is at the center a lot of these junctures in our lives. Because when I think about my own mentor, I have a similar story. So for those of you who may know, my mentor is Elder Fabian, and the way that we got connected, we go to the same church, but during the same COVID time, this is 2020, he would have done Instagram series with his wife on their relationship, kind of going through the stages of how they met, got married, and all of that. I thought to myself, dang, I've never heard a man talk about pursuing a woman like this in my life. So my first thought was, I need to get to know this man. And I felt the Holy Spirit tell me, message him and ask him to be your mentor. No, Kristen, I ain't gonna tell you. I was so scared. I was like, this man is he even going to take me seriously? But I found the courage, sent the message, and when he responded, he said, yes, I'm willing to mentor you. All I have to do is just check in with my pastors and I will get back to you. And 4 years later, bro, we still going strong. And I say that because the great thing about purpose is that if it really is what God has called us to do, then He has the people already that are going to join us on that journey and help us walk it out, right? There is hardly a time where purpose means I got to do it by myself. Granted, there will be times and there will be seasons when it feels as if God has cornered you off to do some work. There will be seasons where God has you set apart so that He can work on your character and test you and refine you. But in the grand scheme of things, God works with people and He helps us with people that show us the way. People that have gone before, people that have had success in certain areas that can teach us the ropes, help us understand how to hone our gifts and propel it forward. And that's why I wanted to bring it up because in our culture, a lot of times it can look like I have to do this on my own. Hustle culture gives that image of self-made millionaires, self-made people that make it seem as if they just got up one day and decided, I'm going to do this. And people didn't help them along the way. But the truth is, if we want to do anything impactful, it's always done in a group. The body of Christ is one of our biggest assets as believers in achieving purpose. And it's not something that we should uh gloss over. But there is one thing that's common between you and me, Kristen, and I'd like you to add on this too. We have to take the initiative if we want those people to help us, especially if we're talking about mentors. It's true that God may have situations where He brings people along that, let's say, see you and decide, I'm going to mentor you. More than likely, you'll have the other situation where you see someone that is in the position you want to be in, and you have to be the one to make contact. Otherwise, nothing will happen. The circumstance will remain the same. But if you take that initiative, especially if it's in faith and you know God has called you to this person, I always say that one question can change your life. And truthfully, one question to the right person at the right time really can change your life.
It's true. And if I could add in here, like as you're speaking, so many thoughts just going through my mind. But to answer your question is like relationships are like seeds. Going back to the whole seed analogy again, is like friendships, relationships. Now, when I say relationships, please understand, I'm not referring to like just friendships. I'm not referring to just marriage relationships. I'm talking about mentor-mentee relationships, relationships at work, relationships with family, etc., etc. So holistically speaking, relationships are like seeds. You don't just plant a seed and leave it there and expect it will automatically grow. You have to water it. You have to fertilize that soil. You have to take care of the seed in order for you to get the harvest that you desire. So the same thing is true with friendships. You have to water that friendship. You have to, one, add value. Again, you see, whole conversation circling back again. You have to add value. And then also you have to take responsibility. So it's like, and I personally believe you shouldn't waste people's time. So if you are asking someone to mentor you and they give you instructions on what to do, don't just sit down on the instructions, implement, and also take initiative as well. As you said, sometimes you might have to message them. In other situations, you might have to initiate that first conversation. But at the end of the day, is like make the most out of the opportunity that you may have that you have available to you. And I know that there may be some of your listeners who may be saying, well, yeah, y'all sound fine. That sounds fine. That sounds good. But there's no one in my life that can mentor me. Maybe there's somebody listening that is saying, well, I don't know anybody who will be a great mentor. Maybe what I would say to you, what I would say is one, yes, start praying about it. But I want you to take an inventory. I want you to look at the people in your life. There might be just one, it might be two, it might be more. I don't know. Who knows? There might be key specific people in your life, or who may not even be in your family, but they could be at your church in your scenario. They could be at a networking event. They could be someplace else. I don't want you to make a list of persons that you believe can help you along your journey, help you along your growth journey. And then I want you to find a way that you can initiate that conversation, whether it is by commenting on their social media posts, just an example, whether it is you send them a direct message via Instagram, or if it is a situation where you don't know their Instagram or their contact information, then maybe you might have to see, well, what networking events might they attend? Or what type of um conferences might they go to, and find ways, or even if it's a situation where there's no option, but you know they have written a book, maybe you can start there reading information that they have written and start there. And trust me, when you pray about it, I believe that God would align the right people at the right time. And I'm a living testimony of that, especially in writing and producing my first book. God aligned the right people at the right time. So that would be my advice.
And it's good advice, bro. Especially when we feel the tug of God on our vision, giving us a roadmap of how to move forward. When it comes to adding people that can go on that journey with us, there is that level of intentionality that we have to have. We can't go into this as a solo ranger thinking that we're going to be the hero of the story. Again, going back to that level of humility that we have to say, I need others with me, running alongside me. And then also having the faith and hope to know that those people are out there, even if they don't come today, even if they don't come tomorrow, even if it takes an entire year, a year of you sacrificing and refining the vision of starting with what you have. It
Yeah.
comes to a point where God starts to bring things together. Both of our lives are a testimony of that very fact. And you mentioned it just now. Like, Kristen, you are not even 23 yet, and God has given you that burden and the ability to write a book. And I can see from the bookshelf behind you that you have a copy, so you could tell us a little bit about this book.
Yeah, that's no problem. So the book is A New Look at Life, Journey into Your Best Life. This is actually the first one. There's a second one coming,
Mhm.
but we will talk about that another time. But this book is an inspirational devotional book, and pretty much it goes in depth as to how we can live a resilient, purpose-driven life. And as we were discussing earlier today, all about purpose, the truth is you cannot walk in your purpose if you don't have God with you. There's no such thing as purpose without God. So in this book, I basically share daily inspiration with readers as to how they can grow deeper in their relationship with God. And the whole title, A New Look at Life, that was intentional. The words, the title was intentional because when we think of the words A New Look at Life, it's all about renewing our minds. Going back to our initial conversation today, is all about renewing our minds. And the word of God say that do not be conformed to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of our mind. So when we renew our minds, when we are able to be transformed from the inside, then we'll be able to journey into our best life or into a better life, a life that is in alignment with what God created us to do, in alignment to the purpose with the purpose that God created us for. So yeah.
That sounds like a serious book, man. Where can we find it? Where can we
Yeah,
find the
so
book?
yeah, so persons can visit my website, www.chris, as in KRIS, inspires, INSPIRES.com, chrisinspires.com, and there's a section on the website about my book, and you just tap it, you read, and you learn more about the book, and there's a form that you can fill out to be able to purchase or to order your copy. Or persons can even email me as well. My email, Graves, Greaves, Chris, Kris, 14 at gmail.com. And you can let me know that you're interested in learning more about the book or even in getting a copy of the book.
That's good stuff, man. Well, guys, we're gonna make sure that we have that information in the description so that you guys could check out this amazing book. But Kristen, I just want to thank you for having this conversation because I knew that as soon as we were talking about this, that you would have had a lot to say because your life really is a testimony of what God can do when He has revealed that there's a greater purpose, that there's a greater plan, and what happens when you accept that plan and you start to walk in it. So, is there any last things you want to say to the listeners before we wrap up?
Yeah, I would say two quick things. And going back to our first question for today, the last few things I want to say. One, it doesn't matter what you're going through right now. Your circumstances do not determine your destiny. They don't determine how far you can go. It doesn't determine how great God can use you. So I want to encourage your listeners, don't give up. You may be in your lowest moment right now, but I want to encourage you to keep holding on because there's a greater plan and purpose on your life. And the second thing I want to leave you with today is this. If you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together with a group of persons who are there to elevate you, who are there to pour into you, and who are there to speak life into you. Because as the Bible says, in a multitude of counselors, there is safety. So I leave you with those words.
Powerful words, man. Guys, this is the first episode of the year, and we're starting on purpose. I hope that this has been a blessing to you. Kristen, thanks again for joining us today. This is not
Thank
going
you
to
as
be the
well.
last time that you come on the podcast. I can tell you that right now. But guys, we have so much more to come, so stay tuned. Until the next time, guys, pray that you stay blessed and have a great day. Peace.